What if I tell you that The Matrix isn't just a sci-fi movie, but a reality we're already living in? That's right. Grab your red pill and buckle up, because we're diving headfirst into the possibility that we're all living in a simulated world. From deja vu to the Mandela effect, the clues are all around us, pointing towards a reality that may not be as real as we once thought. How would you really feel that your very existence is just a computer program running in a cosmic mainframe? Well, in this video, we're going to show you some of the insane experiments that have been conducted to prove the simulated world. So without further ado, let's enter the Matrix. It might sound like a question that you'd only hear at a late-night screening of the movie The Matrix, but lately, it's been getting a lot of attention among some famous scientists and space enthusiasts. Some pretty influential people such as Elon Musk, Michio Kaku, and Neil deGrasse Tyson are taking this simulation hypothesis very seriously. Musk seems to be pretty convinced that our video games are on a path to becoming reality, or is it that our reality is on a path to becoming video game? Either way, he thinks there's a good chance we're all just players in a massive simulation. So, what if this life you're living is actually a video game and someone is actually controlling us? Neil deGrasse Tyson, who is an astrophysicist, thinks that the simulation hypothesis could be true, and he believes that the chances are greater than 50-50. He really wishes he could find a strong argument against it, but unfortunately, he couldn't come up with one. And that's pretty intriguing, isn't it? In 2003, a philosopher from the University of Oxford named Nick Bostrom wrote a paper that started a big discussion about what's real and what's not. He said that if there are advanced civilizations out there that use computers to simulate entire realities, then there could be many simulated worlds out there where the beings living in them have no idea they're not real. It's possible that we might be one of those simulated beings and not even know it. It's kind of crazy to think about, but it's fascinating to ponder the idea that our reality might not be what it seems. These beings might think they're real, but they don't actually have a physical body. They only exist inside the simulation. Bostrom dropped a truth bomb by suggesting that if aliens are a thing and that they do exist, then we humans are most likely just living in their digital playground. Scientists are trying to find ways to test an interesting idea called the simulation hypothesis. This idea proposes that we might be living in a computer simulation instead of a physical reality. However, conducting experiments that can distinguish between physical reality and a simulation is essential to prove this idea scientifically. Scott Aronson, who teaches computer science at the University of Texas at Austin, has some interesting thoughts on what these experiments could mean. He believes that if the program that runs our universe had bugs or glitches, similar to what we've seen in movies like The Matrix, then those bugs could actually have real-world effects that we could observe. In fact, the discovery of such glitches could be seen as evidence of a higher power, much like how the appearance of God in the thundercloud might be seen as evidence for religion. It's definitely an intriguing idea. Well, it seems like even our simulated world isn't perfect, and there might be some bugs in the system. Silas Bean, the nuclear physicist from the University of Washington, thinks that we might be able to track down these elusive glitches by cracking the mathematical code that makes up our virtual reality. It's kind of like being a detective in a sci-fi movie, except instead of chasing after bad guys, we're on the hunt for mathematical flaws. So basically, Silas was saying that scientists in his field use some fancy grid system to understand how tiny particles behave. So in that similar fashion, he believes that if we're living in a simulation, which is a pretty wild idea if you ask me, then maybe the beings running the simulation use that same grid system too. But here's the thing, if our reality is based on this grid thing, then there's a limit to how detailed things can get. Like, there's a limit to how small anything in our simulated universe could be, because it can't be smaller than the size of the grid. Crazy, right? Bean has an amazing plan up his sleeve. Even though our vision may not be sharp enough to catch the resolution limit, he believes we can still detect it through experimentation. How, you ask? By unleashing the wild party with cosmic rays that refuse to follow any rules onto a simulation lattice. With simulation lattice in our hand, we can shake things up and maybe even convince these cosmic revelers to adjust their dance steps and dial down the volume. Who knew that particle physics could be so entertaining? Now, where do you find these particles? Well, the answer is telescope array. It is like a watchful eye in the vast desert of Utah, on the hunt for cosmic rays, hurtling towards Earth from the deepest corners of the universe. It has already caught particles with an energy level so high, it could make Flash jealous. With such a remarkable ability, it's the perfect place to start searching for bugs in any simulation. It's like being an exterminator for the Matrix. Now, once we reach there, what do we see? High-energy cosmic rays, rare and elusive, seem to be causing quite the stir, but fear not. as Silas and his band of skilled researchers are convinced that it's possible to measure these pesky rays and their subtle effects. After all, if simulations are our reality, who is going to say we can't discover our digital overlords? The possibilities are endless. But has our world been poorly depicted? If you're still wondering whether or not this experiment is the only option to find the truth about simulation, let me assure you that there's actually another way to detect mistakes in the simulation we're living in. Instead of looking at the world around us, we could turn our attention inwards. A former NASA engineer named Thomas Campbell and his team came up with an idea to test this. They noticed that in video games, designers usually only create the parts of the virtual world that players can see to make the game more efficient. If the creators of our simulated world work the same way, they might be very careful about simulating things while we're watching, but not so much when they think we're not paying attention. Campbell is really interested in studying quantum physics and is focusing on doing some really cool experiments. He's trying to find any gaps in the way we currently understand quantum physics. He's come up with some interesting ideas for experiments that involve using lasers and lots of different tools to guide the light in different ways. Depending on how the laser light behaves, like a wave or a particle, it will take different paths through the setup. By observing how the light moves, we can learn more about quantum physics and could possibly even discover something new. Basically, according to Campbell's theory, if our reality is created only when we observe it, then his experiment could give us some pretty wild results. For example, it might be able to tell us whether a photon, which is a tiny particle of light, will go through a half-reflective mirror or bounce back. That's something that we usually think is quite difficult to predict, but if Campbell's experiment can do it, then it would be a really clear sign that our reality is actually a simulation. This experiment could help us understand the strange influence that observers seem to have on events in quantum physics. Instead of this being a fundamental aspect of reality, it could be a quirk of the simulation we live in. This would be an incredible discovery. Marcus Noak, a physicist who studies how computers can simulate the world around us, has some doubts about the ways people have tried to prove we're living in a simulated reality. One of the main issues he sees is that some people assume that if we're living in a simulation, it's all for our benefit. But what if the creators of the simulation have other goals in mind, like just watching how we behave, how we do things, and how much can we evolve? Marcus points out that some of the methods people have suggested to test if we're living in a simulation might not work if the simulation is really detailed, or if the creators have built ways to hide the fact that we're in a simulation. It's not like Marcus doesn't believe that we are in a simulation. It's more like he thinks that we cannot fully test the simulation hypothesis if the creators are actually hiding things from us, such as things that we cannot see. Let's say dark matter or dark energy, for example. Instead, we can only explore certain ideas about how the simulation might work. We have to hope that the creators of the simulation won't bother stopping us from discovering their creation because they're either too lazy or don't care enough to intervene. Marcus is especially interested in figuring out how much computational power would be required to simulate the entire world and what type of computer would be necessary to accomplish this task. This analysis is a bit concerning because it combines the negative aspects of both possibilities. We can't be sure whether we are living in a simulated reality or not, and just the idea that we might be is pretty scary in itself. According to Neil deGrasse Tyson, it's a creepy concept. However, Bostrom thinks it promotes a sense of absolute dependence. Bostrom is like a gamer who's just discovered cheat codes for an infinite stack of simulations. He says that if there was infinite computing power available, we could have simulations on simulations on simulations endlessly. As far as we know, the amount of computing power available in our universe is limited, so we can only create a finite number of simulation levels. For now, it seems like we can't cheat our way to an unlimited gaming experience. Artificial intelligence and computer modeling are advancing rapidly, which means that we might be able to create simulations that contain self-aware digital beings. The idea of being able to do this is exciting and also a little scary. It raises some thought-provoking questions, like whether these simulations within a simulation can go on forever, or if they will eventually come to an end. It's a fascinating and challenging concept that makes us wonder about the possibilities. Whether we are mere pawns in a cosmic game or the master architects of our own reality is a question that may continue to boggle our minds for years to come. But fear not, for as we ponder the mysteries of our existence, we can take comfort in the fact that, simulation or not, we are here and now, experiencing the beauty and wonder of life. So let's raise a glass to this grand simulation and cheers to the adventure that awaits us in this simulated world.